Welcome to Sunday Sermons from the Williamsburg Community Chapel, brought to you by the Chapel Podcast Network. Let's grab our Bibles, open up to the book of Mark, chapter 10, verses 1 through 16. And I'll read verses 7 through 9 for us now, as we prepare to hear from lead pastor Travis Simone, as he helps us continue in our summer sermon series titled, The King and the Kingdom. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate.
It's been about 6 weeks since I have been in the pulpit, so I'm a little clumsy here. And if you wonder what I've been doing for the past 6 weeks, I've been preparing for next year's annual teaching theme. And I look forward to presenting that to the elders in our August business meeting. But I've been thinking a lot about exile, preparing a year-long focus on the biblical theme of exile. So I've been talking about exile. I've been pondering the exile in the Bible. And I guess this has leaked out in my family life because yesterday, Nina and I were getting ready for a wedding together. And we were in the bathroom at the same time. And our house was built in 1960. So we don't have some of these larger bathrooms of the more modern homes. I think my wife will forever long for the dual sinks. I think that's really the key to a happy marriage. We do not have dual sinks, so we're in there together. And right as we're about to leave the house for the wedding, she looks at me and says, I've heard even the best marriages feel like exile. So the best marriages feel like exile, which leads to our topic for this morning, which is marriage. And I think marriage often feels like a test that I often fail, as you can see from my wife's comment yesterday. One of the tests in our marriage is whoever gets up last has to make the bed. That's our agreement. If you are up last, it's your responsibility to make the bed for the other person. And so on Friday, this past Friday, I was up last, but I had an important thing to get to at work, and so I didn't make the bed. And I came downstairs and I went to Nina's office. She works from home. And I said, I want you to know I'm owning it. I didn't make the bed today. I'm sorry, I couldn't get to it. I've got an early appointment. I've got to get in to the office now. I got to start prepping the sermon. I just want you to know I'm owning it right now. And she looks at me and she goes, oh no, what will I do? Travis has not made the bed one more time. And I thought, do I fail this test more often than I thought? And I thought I was pretty good at passing this test. How hard is it to pass this test? And so my question this morning is, how do you pass the never-ending tests of marriage? I also have another question. How can a sermon on marriage be relevant for the unmarried? We will learn the answers to these questions as we watch Jesus take a test on marriage in Mark chapter 10, verses 1 through 12. Look at verses 2 through 4 and pay attention to the test. And Pharisees came up and in order to test him, asked, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? He answered them, what did Moses command you? They said, Moses allowed a man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away. Now the Pharisees here are referencing Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. If you're taking notes, you might want to write that down. This is the passage from the Old Testament that the Pharisees are referring to. If you were to look at Deuteronomy chapter 24, it's a case study. It's a case study about a man who marries a woman, but then she loses favor in his eyes because he has found something, and I'm quoting here, indecent in her. Now, there were two main camps in Jesus' day regarding what qualified as indecent. There was a rabbinic school called the Rabbinic School of Shammai that believed the word indecent referred to sexual immorality, adultery in the marriage. There was another rabbinic school, the Rabbinic School of Hillel, which had a more expansive view of the word indecent. And the word indecent, according to Hillel, could mean essentially anything that the husband deemed it to mean. He even has a famous saying about it: if she doesn't cook food you like, that can be indecent. If you find one fairer than she can become indecent to you. So there are two main camps regarding what qualified as indecent, but the consensus was, and this is the important thing, the consensus was that you could pass the marriage test by discerning the right legislation. What is the right way to legislate this? In other words, agree on what indecent means. Don't do anything indecent, or if something indecent does occur, then you are justified in withdrawing from the marriage. I think a lot of people try to pass the marriage test by way of legislation. I'll wash the dishes twice a week and do 25% of bath times while being responsible for 75% of our household income. You do the other 5 times a week, you do 75% of bath times and make 25% of the money. That's a legislative approach to marriage. Or I'll do garbage, yard, and most of the after-school driving, because I don't really mind driving, in exchange for you doing cooking, cleaning, and bedtime. You can arrange this in all kinds of different ways. You get a certain kind of job that makes a certain kind of income that allows us to have a particular lifestyle. And if you do that, I'll be proud of you. I'll pursue you. I will build a family with you. But if that job goes away, if the lifestyle decreases, if the legislation agreed to is violated, well, then I feel justified to withdraw. Justified to withdraw physically, emotionally, spiritually, or even in extreme circumstances, legally. I'm not asking for a show of hands here, but has anyone ever gotten caught up in a legislative approach to marriage? See, Jesus offers a different answer to the test. It's quite different, starkly different. It's in verses 3 and 4. Is it lawful? He answered them, "What did Moses command you?" They said, "Moses allowed a man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away." You see, the key thing you need to see in the passage is the word command versus the word allowed. Notice Jesus says, what did Moses, what does God's word, what does the scripture, what does the Bible command in regard to this? And notice the Pharisees respond, well, Moses allowed or permitted this. The Pharisees are talking about what is permitted. Jesus is talking about what is commanded. The Pharisees want to deal in the realm of legislation, and Jesus points them back to the truth of God's revelation. What is God's revealed will for marriage? I'm not talking about legislation, the rules. How do you organize your life together? What is revelation? What is God's revelation, his revealed will for marriage? The answer is in verses 5 through 9. Look with me on your song sheets, verses 5 through 9. And Jesus said to them, because of your hardness of heart, he wrote you this commandment. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they're no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. Oneness. Oneness. This is God's revealed will for marriage. In the midst of all your legislation, you missed God's revelation. You missed something exceedingly more important than the meaning of the word indecent or who does the dishes on Tuesday night. And I think you could summarize Jesus' teaching here by saying, don't miss the wonder of oneness. That's what Jesus is trying to communicate to the Pharisees. Don't miss the wonder of oneness. It's the wonder of oneness is that marriage points to all kinds of beautiful things in this world. The wonder of oneness is that marriage first points to the unity of God. And this is why Jesus quotes first from Genesis 1:27 when he says, from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. That's a direct quote from Genesis 1:27. And let me just read that in context so you can see why the first thing that oneness in marriage points to is it points to the unity, the oneness of God. So Genesis, I'll read 1:26 and 27. Then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God made man or mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Now take note of just how interesting this passage is, the strange words this passage uses for God. Then God said, let us make man or mankind in our image. Who is God talking to? I could walk us all the way through Genesis chapter 1 to show you some of the contours of the Hebrew language, that the word for God is actually plural in Genesis chapter 1, but the verbs that are used to describe his work, like God created, are singular. And so right from the very first pages of the Bible, you get this picture of God as a complex unity, that the church discerned God's nature is a tri-unity, a trinity, that God is one, eternally expressed in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And therefore, it takes two canvases to paint God's image. And these two canvases are not interchangeable. They are complementary. It doesn't say that God made two people. It says God made them male and female. They are fully equal, but not equivalent. A man and a woman are not the same thing. It takes two complementary partners working together at unity to express the unity of the triune God. Because unity is not uniformity. Oneness is not sameness. Which is why this church has always taught and will continue to teach that marriage is between one man and one woman for life. That's the definition of marriage. That's the biblical understanding of marriage. Because the two at creation are complementary partners, equal but not equivalent, working hard together to express, to point to the oneness, the unity of God. So not only does the wonder of oneness point to the oneness of God, the wonder of oneness in marriage points to the unity of Jesus and the church. And this gets at the answer to my question earlier in the sermon. How can a sermon on marriage be relevant for those who aren't married? I want this sermon to be relevant to everyone this morning. And this is the answer. If you're not married this morning, The wonder of oneness is that marriage points to the unity of Jesus and the church. This is why the Apostle Paul refers to the same verse that Jesus quotes a little later, Genesis 2:24, in Ephesians 5:31. The Apostle Paul, quoting Genesis, writes this: "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." This is a profound mystery. Understatement, Paul. This is a profound mystery. And I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. That oneness in marriage, the wonder of it is that it points to Christ and the church. And finally, the wonder of oneness in marriage is that it points to the unity of the new heavens and the new earth in the new creation. Oh, excuse me, let me just go back. Again, if you're not married this morning, that's the church. This is your place where you can experience the same kind of oneness that God wills in marriage in your own life. And we'll talk a little bit later about how what that looks like. But this is the place. This is the environment, if you're single, to work at pursuing oneness with a body of believers. And finally, as I said, the wonder of oneness points to the unity of the new heavens and the new earth and the new creation. You see, our ultimate hope in Christ is not that we go somewhere when we die, but that somewhere eventually comes right here. This is why Jesus prays, "Thy will be done." We prayed it earlier, "Thy will be done on earth as it's already being done in heaven." We're preparing here on earth for the moment when what's going on in heaven eventually is joined with what's happening here on earth in the new creation. Mark chapter 1, verse 10, the first sermon in our series, we saw the heavens being torn open at Jesus' baptism and the Holy Spirit descending on Jesus like a dove. The process of the reunification of the heavens and the earth has started with Jesus Christ. The process continues in marriage and in oneness with the church as a body of believers. And the oneness in marriage that we pursue points forward to the ultimate completion of the new heavens and the new earth uniting in the new creation. I said this a couple Januaries ago, but it bears repeating. I say this a lot when I do premarital and marriage counseling. Your marriage isn't the point. Let me say that again. Your marriage isn't the point. Your marriage points. It points to something beyond itself. Your marriage is intended to point. It points to the oneness of God. It points to the oneness of Jesus Christ and the church. It points to the oneness of the new heavens and the new earth and the new creation. Don't miss the wonder of oneness. And you can't get to wonder through legislation. We must first stand in awe of God's revelation concerning his will for marriage, and then do the work of oneness. So don't miss the wonder of oneness and do the work of oneness. And that's what Jesus is getting at with his second quote from Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. I'll start with this point. The work of oneness begins when we stay humble. Stay humble. Look at verse 7. Just going to read the first part of verse 7. Again, Jesus is quoting from Genesis here. "Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife." Now, in the ancient world, and up to this day, we have something in common with the ancient world on this one. If you want a meeting with someone powerful, especially more powerful than you, you have to go to them. So just imagine a thought experiment for a moment. Imagine I have a problem. It's a problem so big, I discern that the only person who can help me solve my problem is Governor Youngkin. And I'd really like to speak to Governor Youngkin about my problem. And let's imagine in this world that somehow I'm able to break through to Governor Youngkin's office. And he takes my phone call. Say, Governor Youngkin, I have this problem. It's so big. You're the only one that can help me solve it. I really need a meeting. And let's just imagine for a moment that Governor Youngkin says, okay, Travis, let's have a meeting. Why don't you be in my office about 8 a.m. on Friday? I go, ooh, Glenn, sorry. 8 a.m. on Friday, it's not gonna work. Richmond, a little far for me. I'm here in Williamsburg. Why don't you come to my office at 9? I gotta make the bed, it's the whole process. So you come to my office at 9 and we'll just work this through. I think he would hang up on me in that moment. If you're asking for assistance from someone more powerful than you, you always go to them. That's the way the world worked, and that's the way the world works. Now, imagine this. Look at what Jesus says. In the midst of this highly patriarchal society, where it was only the man who could write a certificate of divorce, where it was only the woman, get this, it was only the woman who could commit adultery against her husband. If a man committed adultery, he didn't do it against his wife, but against his father-in-law. Into that culture comes God's first push for us to do the work of oneness. The man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife. The more powerful moves toward the less powerful. This is the first move of the first marriage. Marriage begins in an act of radical humility. And the work of oneness is to continue in this posture of humility through the duration of the marriage. I have a little principle that I give couples sometimes. Share it with everyone here. I tell them often, humility precedes resurrection. Always does, 100% of the time. For couples that are having trouble in their marriage, I say, humility will precede your resurrection. Someone is gonna have to engage in an act of great humility. That's the way it worked for Jesus. The humility of the cross led to the resurrection from the grave. And that's the way it works in marriage and in every human relationship. Humility always precedes resurrection. If you need a resurrection in your marriage, I invite you to consider what act of humility you need to engage in this week. Jesus says it in more than one place. I'll quote it from Matthew 23:12. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Don't miss the wonder of oneness and do the work of oneness. Stay humble and stay committed. Stay committed. That's the second part of the work of oneness. Again, verse 7, still in verse 7. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife. We tend to believe that the sign of a great marriage is intense feelings of love. But this verse is clear that marriage is not about the feeling of love, but an unshakable commitment to hold fast to your spouse. Here's another principle I give people. Love follows commitment. Love follows commitment. Here's an illustration. Imagine parents with their kids going, I'm only gonna love you if you are lovely to me. If you say nice things to me, if you act kind to me, if you get me great presents, that's when I will love you. That's not how parental love works. Your kid can't say a word. He or she is constantly spitting up all over you, They're bleeding you dry financially. Eventually, they start telling you how you don't know anything about life when you're the one that got them to this point in life. And what do? You stay engaged in the concrete actions of demonstrating love. And your feeling of love follows your commitment to loving your children. I believe we have an epidemic in our society of people who are pursuing oneness with their children rather than oneness with their spouse. People are pursuing oneness with their children rather than oneness with their spouse. Your marriage is like the sun. The kids are meant to orbit around your marriage like the planets orbit around the sun. Too many people are making the kids the sun, and their marriage is trying to orbit around the sun. Let me say this as clearly as I know how to say it. The greatest gift you can give to your children is to do the work of oneness in marriage. The greatest gift you can give to your children is not a great vacation. It's not access to an elite travel sports club. The greatest gift you can give your kids is doing the work of oneness in your marriage. Now, kids are not the only thing that can hinder your commitment in marriage. Remember, what's the man supposed to leave? His father and his mother. There are things you need to leave behind from your family of origin. Perhaps there's dysfunction, anger, alcohol abuse, wounds, unhelpful expectations. Now, just because you leave those things behind does not mean you're not intentional about bringing some good things with you as well. When you leave, you both leave stuff behind and you pack your bag filled with good things. Last Saturday at the beach, my daughter, Ruthie, my youngest daughter, she lost her watch. She loves this watch. She wears it all the time. It broke in the ocean. It was gone. And Nina was kind of having a soft spot after this happened. She said, Travis, do you think you should sneak off before we head back and, go to the surf shop and buy her the watch? And you know what I said? No, I'm not doing that. She needs to learn when you lose something, it's gone. You lost it. There are consequences. Let her have some time. Maybe she can wait till her birthday. She'll get a new watch on her birthday. It's only a few months away. So we went back to Williamsburg, no watch. I felt bad. Because that's never how my parents treated me. My parents were always so generous with me. If I lost something, they would work to replace it as fast as they can. I remember one time I got my bike stolen because I didn't lock it up down at the beach. Now, my dad had a long talk with me about that one, but then he bought me a new bike, and it always made an impression on me. Taught me a little something about God's grace. And so on my day off on Monday, I drove back to Virginia Beach and went to the surf shop I should have gone to on Saturday. I came home that night. I said, Ruthie, I want to give you something, but I want you to know where this gift really comes from. I gave her the watch, and I said, this gift really comes from something that Grandma and Grandpa instilled in me. And it's something that I want to carry into my marriage and the way I raise my kids. And so we do have to leave things behind. But it doesn't mean you're not intentional about what you bring with you. And the Hebrew word for leave in the Genesis passage that Jesus is quoting is quite strong. It's the Hebrew word forsake. It's like the word that God would use when he would tell Israel, you have forsaken me for the worship of idols. It's a strong word. So here's your homework. What do you need to leave behind? What do you need to carry forward into the future? What do you need to leave behind? What do you need to carry forward into the future? Don't miss the wonder of oneness and do the work of oneness. Stay committed. Finally, Stay uncovered. This is in verses 7 through 9. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother, hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. See, oneness in marriage is several things at one time, according to this verse. First, it is the future promise of God. They will become. It is our present fixed reality. They are no longer two. And it is God's past accomplished work, what God has joined together. And yet, because we are tempted to reject the wonder of oneness, Jesus gives one new command. He only gives one new command in this passage to all who follow him to help them persevere in the work of oneness. He says, what God has joined together, let no man separate. Now, there's a beautiful illustration of the uncovered nature of marriage that's given in Genesis. Just after God says, leave your father and mother, hold fast your wife, the two will become one flesh. The very next verse says the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. You see, the first marriage was an uncovered marriage. And we must do the work to return to our uncovered state. Here's what I tell couples in premarital counseling. The man and his wife were both naked. They were not ashamed. I say when there is shame in your marriage, when shame is high in your marriage, oneness will be low. When shame is low in your marriage, oneness has the potential to be high. You constantly have to do the work of uncovering to reduce the shame in your marriage and so increase the oneness in your marriage. The first thing that happens when Adam and Eve disobey God's command and eat from the tree they are told not to eat of, they realize they're naked. They become self-conscious. They are ashamed, and their response to that shame is to cover themselves. I think one of the most profound verses in the Bible is when God calls out to Adam in the garden. He says, "Where are you?" And Adam responds with these three concepts. He says, "I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. I was scared of the shame in my life, so I hid. I covered stuff up." The work of oneness is to stay uncovered. So again, imagine we're doing a very big counseling session here. Here's homework I give to couples. Go through your life in 5-year increments, starting very young, from whenever you can remember, start there, and talk about what brought you shame in that 5 years. What's hard for you to still talk about? Get uncovered. 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, 25 to 30, and on and on and on. If you're older, you can go by decade if you really want to. I usually do this with couples before they get married. And then affirm your love and your commitment to each other. As you uncover, affirm that what you see is still beautiful. I promise, so many couples look at me like a deer in headlights when I give them this assignment. No one comes back to their second session regretting that they did it and that they did it honestly. I actually had to take some of my own medicine this past winter on my sabbatical. One of my goals on sabbatical was to invest in my marriage. And Nina and I spent a week away, just the two of us. We had not done 1 week since our honeymoon, since our honeymoon 21 years ago. A week, just the two of us. And on that week, we were gonna take stock of the past 20-ish years. And one of the things that I was sort of trembling going into the week, I wanted to make sure that some of my behavior early on in our marriage that I hadn't done damage that was still persisting into the future. Nina and I got married when we were young, and the difficulty of marriage just kind of spooked me. And I went from kind of a carefree college guy to a really uptight married man. And I said things and I did things that I know were hurtful. And I just wanted to go back and make sure that that wasn't still causing shame in our marriage. I held a little bit of shame over from it. So about day 5, I finally got the courage to bring it up. I said, Nina, I know I behaved in some ways that weren't right when we first got married. And I still think about those things. And I just want to make sure that doesn't hinder our oneness going into the next 20 years. I was nervous about what she would say, genuinely nervous. She looked at me and said, you know, Travis, I was young too. And I didn't know what I was doing either. It was just pure grace. It was pure grace to cover what I was ashamed of. And I'm so grateful for that. It was, as I spoke of earlier, that act of radical humility that sustains oneness in marriage. Now, if this sounds scary, I'll tell you it is. I was scared. The question is, where can we find the power to do the work of oneness, to stay humble, to stay committed, to stay uncovered? Jesus Christ left the ultimate Father. He's the one that left the Father. Jesus Christ left not the dysfunction of his Father, he left the goodness and glory of his Father to hold fast to you. Jesus Christ did the work of oneness. Jesus Christ on the cross said, my God, why have you forsaken us? He experienced forsakenness so you could experience oneness. They divided his garments and cast lot for his clothing. He was uncovered. He took on the shame of nakedness so that we might, without shame, uncover with our spouse and in our church community. Oh, the wonder of oneness. Don't miss it. Don't miss the wonder of oneness, and commit to doing the work of oneness.
Thank you for joining us today. Here at the Williamsburg Community Chapel, we are all about making disciples of Jesus Christ. So wherever you are on your spiritual journey, we hope you will join us this summer as the Gospel of Mark teaches us that Jesus is the King and how his life initiates a new kingdom.